Hey. Reminder to sign in on the agenda sheet if you haven't already.
Morning, everybody. Afternoon, I guess, for everybody. Even me now.
Good evening.
Hey, Patrick. Welcome. A name I recognize from inside Slack there.
I give people 2 or 3 more minutes before we get started. Another reminder to sign on the agenda and add any RSCs or things you want to chat about this week into the agenda items list under the attendees sheet.
Really snuck that build packages RFC in there at the last minute.
Yeah, I know, I did. Thought you might not notice it.
I'm really looking forward to this one.
Yeah.
It solves a huge problem I have.
Well, that's the goal. Eventually.
All right, should we kick things off? First standing item is new faces. Anybody at this meeting that hasn't joined working group meetings in the past who wants to introduce themselves? Nope. All right. Next thing on the agenda, Release planning and updates. Usually Javier gives an update. I don't see him here right now. Oh, there he is.
I'm here. So we are currently working through buttoning up the release for pack 0.11.0. Everything is pretty much set, and we're working out the final things for the release notes and a blog post that we'll be publishing in relation to some additional security and performance changes that we've done in this latest release. This should be done here, hopefully within the next hour.
Emily's not here to talk about life cycle, but do you have any insight into A, what life cycle is going out with this, and B, whether we're going to do a life cycle release and another quick follow to iterate on?
So I know the default lifecycle for pack right now will be 0.7.5, which was the last released one. There is a release that Emily is hoping to get out that will start feature complete today. And I don't know, Natalie, if you have talked to her a little bit more about this upcoming release.
Apologies, Natalie. I should have asked you. I saw you on the call.
I sadly don't have any other insights, so we can follow up.
Okay. Javier, what's the, if that comes out and gets called 08 or 0.76, what's the policy then for pack? Will it do a fast follow to change the default, or is it just grab the next one?
It'll be until the next release of pack where we'll actually bump it.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you.
All right, unless there's anything else on the release side, I'll do the 10-minute outstanding RFC review. And then we have one RFC to present right after that. So give me 1 second to share my screen. Everybody see that? Cool.
Good to go.
Just fix Zoom for a second here. There we go. So offline build packages, we're about to talk about that, so I'll skip over it. Next on the list, RFs, this is a draft, skip over that. Non-breaking lifecycle support for pre-1.0 API minor versions. I think this is, I hear, a controversial RFC that needs a lot more discussion.
You've missed some great meetings. Actually, I want to ask about this one. Last I heard is this is close, pending some changes from Terrence, suggestions from Terrence. You're muted again, Terrence.
Emily and I met after that meeting to have even more fun, but I think we're coming towards a good consensus, so she wants me to write a PR to her PR, basically. That,
okay.
Addend some stuff on there and should address some of Joe's concerns as well.
Cool.
Breaking changes are always fun. All right, if there's nothing else on that one, add RFC for stack metadata. I think Cash have opened this. I don't see him here. Any context
Crack
on
it
this?
open. Let's see what the vote structure currently is. Outstanding on that. Yeah, bunches of responses still expected. So just waiting on him there.
Cool.
I think I asked Ben a question in here as well.
Yeah, I responded earlier today before our leadership meeting, but you haven't had a chance to see it.
Are there outstanding questions for Cash up here?
There are some still, yeah.
Okay.
Or perhaps we have asked a bunch of questions of one another. We have come to resolutions on those, and those need to be rolled back in by Cash up.
Sounds good. I can let him know to jump in there. Anything else in that?
No.
Add root build pack as an interface for app image extension RFC. This one, Joe isn't here, but we're still working through. I forget what the status is. I think I need to chat with
The last comment on it.
Joe Moore as 5 days ago. I think we're getting really close.
It's still, yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah,
go
we
ahead.
haven't ignored that one, so I think we're good there. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. That's a very interesting one, very important one. RFC, publish a build pack with pack. Any updates there? I'm not going to click on it unless someone tells me to.
You have a pending review request.
I do.
You,
huh?
Stephen.
Well, so do many other people here.
What's the last date on that one?
Is this
Let's
getting
just make
to
sure it's in the last week.
7 days ago? No, 4 hours ago. Oh, okay, I see. So it looks like it just got into a state where it's ready to review. So the action there is maintainers.
Everybody go review it.
Yeah, cool. Process-specific environment variables. I'm going to pick that up someday and turn that into a thing because I still think it makes sense and it's very logical and there's no downside to it, even though.
Do we have the permissions to? Can you click that and see if you can convert it into a draft request? I think there's a link in the upper right.
You definitely can with.
Lower down, a little bit below reviewers. Up an inch. Nope.
Convert to draft here.
Yeah.
Yep, click that. Pull it off our list of things to review.
Is it okay? He did. Sire really said he wasn't gonna pick it back up.
Yeah.
So
he's not coming back to it. Yeah.
Okay.
If you convert to draft, does Stephen feel less bad because you don't shame him every week for not working on it?
It's got to get out of this list of things that we think should be moving along.
Someone else, not Stephen, can also pick this up, by the way. It's not to be Stephen.
Yeah, if you're interested in
I
a
feel
really,
strong about it.
yeah, if you're interested in a really well-defined, simple RFC that I think is a good thing to do, but maybe not be the highest priority thing in the entire world, I'll concede. Then it would be something you could take a look at. It's a lot of code in the builder and the builder API and the Buildpacks, just an extension of that. All right, export report, FCP. Are we done with FCP?
I believe it is, and I will merge it right this second.
Nice. I'll move right on then to RFC for custom CA certs.
Was there a comment on there, or is that on report, or is it done?
So I think Xander is putting this down, and I don't know if we have somebody who's going to pick it up and run with it from here. I think it's kind of blocked on root Buildpacks is the latest. What we decided is that you would prefer to have the underlying interface for modifying stack, making generic changes to stack images worked out before we figure out how to apply that or not apply that to the CA cert problem. Unless anybody else has context on CA certs, I could totally be wrong now. So just what I've heard.
Does Xander putting this down mean we should move this to draft because we still want something for CA certs, but it's like blocked on the root Buildpacks?
That seems reasonable. Does anybody think it should
is
be
that
draft?
is that what Xander said when you talked to him last?
Xander is working on other things now. I don't think he cares what happens to this RFC, if that makes sense.
Okay.
He's not working on cloud data Buildpacks right now. So he said that it's abandoned and anybody can pick it up. I'm going to convert it to draft, unless somebody says no.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. We are going to eventually have to start pruning the draft ones. We can't just have 50 in draft either, but that is for another day.
Converting to draft pending root Buildpack RFC. Build plan merging. This did this become a different RFC that we've talked about?
Yeah, this became a different RFC. I think last week or the week before.
But did this literal RFC turn into that one, or is there another RFC open?
No, this one was converted over inside of this PR.
Nice. Okay.
If
awesome.
I recall.
So this definitely, there's some really good stuff in here. this is
Is it
probably
worth
worth.
making an agenda item today?
That's what I was going to suggest. Dan, is that, and Dan and Forrest, both of you are kind of authors of this, right? Forrest, I think actually. Forrest, you were taking this one, and Dan, you were more in the offline build pack thing. Forrest, are you okay chatting about this more today?
Yeah, sure.
But Ben, I think last time you said you wanted a chance to dig into it a little bit. Did you get a chance to?
I have gotten a chance to. I want to put this below the dependency
Offline.
one.
Is that cool?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, it's
Awesome.
and with the idea that like I'm totally okay if we run all the way to the end on the dependency one. It is a really big thing, and we can punt this to next week or tomorrow to discuss it if we need to. Yeah.
Image exposes metadata for all layers that participate in a build. We had some great discussion of this at one of the work group meetings. I think it was last week. But we decided that there's an issue with build reproducibility that also relates into the one we just talked about also, where if we put metadata about strictly build time things on the image, then you sacrifice reproducibility when the tooling changes in insignificant ways. So I think we're waiting on Paul to look at report.
Well, I think we're waiting on, Paul to look at report Tom, but also report Tom to go through, and then maybe adapting that RFC to
work on top of
leverage report. Yeah.
Cool. That's draft. Sorry. It's hard to tell the gray from the green a little bit. RFC app image extensions. This is going to merge with, go away or something in favor of root build packs. I'm not going to talk about it.
Yeah, is root build pack supposed to be a separate RFC, or is it the same RFC as that one?
Well,
I feel like we said both things at one point, and you asked Joe to just make a separate RFC.
It is both things. This is the first RFC. This is the second RFC, but it's open as a different PR. And Joe put me as an author on this one so that it's clear that it's a combination of the two things. It is what it is.
I guess I'm wondering, what does that mean for the app, your like original app extension RFC? Is that a thing we want to keep open still?
I think the answer is the other one should be closed in favor of this one, but I want Joe to say that this is just give it a little more time.
Okay.
I'd like to chat with Joe about it and make sure that we definitely don't need anything from the previous one, that it shouldn't be an RFC that proposes root build packs or an RFC that proposes other kinds of app extensions. I think we don't want that. I think we just want to close the existing one or the old one in favor of the new one, but just want to have a chat with him first.
Okay.
Cool. So I think that's it for RFC review. I'm going to stop sharing. And if everybody wants to move back to the doc, the next thing on the agenda that everybody is very excited about is offline build packages. And Dan, I'll let you take it from here.
Yeah, okay. So Ben is right. I did just open this before this meeting, so I can give kind of like a high level overview of what this is doing, and then we can talk about it a little bit and probably talk about it again.
That sounds great. Can you share your screen?
Yeah.
And maybe in a readable mode, so it's a little easier for people to see too. Thanks.
Okay, so this RFC is kind of designed to solve a couple problems that we've run into when packaging build packs for offline environments. Namely that as things stand right now, the way that we package dependencies for a build pack, such as like Ruby, is we actually end up chucking them into the tarball. This kind of has some not great side effects, meaning a online build pack and a build pack package with these like offline dependencies are gonna have different SHAs. So they're gonna, there has to be some sort of order of precedence that a registry figures out when you add both of them. And so you can kind of like lose offline support inadvertently. So basically what this does at a high level is it just takes all of these dependencies that we would normally throw in a build pack, pulls them out, and puts them in the build package, like as layers. And as a result, now that their layers in the build package, the lifecycle has to have some mechanisms for like handling them, making them available at build time, figuring out which dependencies should be added to a build so that you don't just get every offline dependency on your registry when you do a build with a given build pack. So I guess any questions on that so far?
Less of a question, but just a little bit of a clarifying point for folks. When Dan's talking about layers, existing in the build package and then moving to the app, part of the idea behind this is a layer in the build package can stay the same layer as it moves across to the application without ever needing to get rebuilt or retard. So it's like extremely, if you want to install Ruby, it's an extremely performant way to get Ruby in the final image, where it might just be able to stick on the registry the whole time, right? So there's a big performance optimization as part of that, just for application builds, that I just wanted to point out, just to make it clear.
So when we're talking about
Can you
build
walk through that a little bit? Like how? Sorry, can you elaborate a little bit on how you plan to achieve that?
Dan is about to do it later in the thing.
Yeah.
Let's see. Is it okay to wait? Yeah. I didn't want to derail and start explaining his PR. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I think was there another question?
Yeah, I had a quick clarifying question, I hope. So when we're talking about build packages, right, they exist in two forms. They exist in the image form, where it's in a registry somewhere and layers are, kind of distributed in a different way, versus a, .cnb file. So in this proposal, when you're talking about packaging the dependencies in the CMB format specifically, we're saying that in that format, it'll have all the dependencies embedded in it. So it'd be like a really large, potentially .cmb file. Is that right?
Yep, exactly. Yep.
Okay.
But the digest of the build pack itself wouldn't change between the offline and the online one. So you could imagine extracting the online one out of the offline one and it's still being usable, or hydrating the dependencies of a offline or online one to make it an online one afterwards. And all of those operations should work because the build pack code itself doesn't change between the two.
The digest of the build pack is just the digest of the build pack layer?
Right. You could imagine in the KPAC context, KPAC deciding to only use the online bits because an edge node is too far away to transfer all the build pack dependencies to it for some builds, right? And things like that would work under this model.
Yeah, and I guess kind of going along with that, it's basically just an extension onto like a build package. So the last so many layers are just going to be some arrangement of these extra dependencies that you want added in, right? And I think that this probably gets at something that Ben's wanted, which is like your Java dependencies being able to be deduplicated on a registry and not have an entire new set of them every time you push up a new build package. But okay.
Yeah, that's a big one, definitely.
Yeah.
Registry on a node also, right? They only have to be pulled to a VM once.
So
maybe like we already have that, right? We already get that because the layer that's created with the JVM on it at the end is always dedupable because it normalizes it.
The build pack has to end up on the node, and every time you push a build pack, all of the Java dependencies have to be re-downloaded by the node right now.
On the build nodes.
Do the build. Yeah, build nodes.
On the build nodes, yep.
So I guess here, I guess I can keep walking through this a little bit. So here's kind of like the meat and potatoes of what's being proposed here, which is we want a way for stuff to end up on the file system during build, for our build package to be able to say, okay, sweet, I do want this dependency. It's something I have access to. I don't even have to move it. And then the second piece is just like all of the additional little bits of metadata that gets sprinkled around in the lifecycle so that it can figure out what's going on. And this is kind of the structure that I would like to see on first glance when we're doing a offline build where we have this additional folder that contains some identifiers, and then some additional information that a user can provide about their dependencies.
By user, you mean the Buildpack author?
Yeah.
So
Sorry.
I see so I see the listing that dependency placement doesn't depend on dependency bits, specifically on the SHA-256. I'm surprised by that, since the SHA-256 is a perfect disambiguation. The fact that it's getting positioned in this way means that you could, two people, right? Like, let's say, for example, Heroku and Cloud Foundry both need the same version of the JDK. By making this, you can never dedupe those layers, since the paths that they're going to be at is different.
Yeah.
Why not use the SHA-256 of, like, effectively the digest of the directory?
Yeah. So that is a great question. And so I think me and Steven had a long conversation about why we would want to do this. And I think that at the end of the day, the reason that we would like to do this is so that people who are building dependencies that your build pack is going to use can know where they're going to live on the file system. Just for, like, I think, Steven, the argument or the example that you gave was Apache, I believe, right? We want to be able to let it have like a default configuration so that it'll look. Sorry.
No, you can keep going. It's fine.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I think that some of these dependencies, I guess we would like to have them know where they're going to end up on the file system.
I guess to be really clear about what that means, there's a big problem we didn't think about ahead of time when we talked about initially using SHA-256 in the paths, which is that everything inside of that SHA-256 directory can't reference the SHA because it's a SHA of itself. So we would suddenly not be able to use absolute paths at all in those dependencies, which lots of things don't work really well with, right? Like, it seems like a great idea, but it just doesn't work.
Yeah. I have many questions. Is there a segment down here that's going to talk about exactly how these will be reused at runtime?
Yeah.
Okay, keep going.
And actually, it's okay. I can kind of jump to that if you'd like me to. But okay, so we kind of then define this interface for how these dependencies are going to be given to a build pack, and it's another configuration file packaged to TOML. And here we can kind of like look at the contents. Initially, I thought it would be a good idea to just use an environment variable that's like separated by colons, but it means that you have to like iterate through the entire thing and probably check each of these TOML files to figure out if a dependency is really what you want, right?
That's the thing that, like, that feels like a perfect illustration of the problem, right? Like, today, the way I believe you do it, but certainly the way I manage my dependencies is, we know we can predict exactly what that's going to be named, right? Like, I'm surprised that there's a need for this file. If I know that my build pack TOML describes a bunch of dependencies, right? Because it's also going to need to describe where to download them if the dependency has something available. It describes exactly what the SHA is going to be. I can predict using nothing but my build TOML exactly what the path to that dependency is going to be. And it feels like this should be possible as well, right? My build pack TOML describes all of the different versions of Node that I might have. And given that, I should be able to predict exactly what the file on the file system should look like and not need to go look up everything else. Why isn't that true?
Yeah. So it's the like same exact trade-off of, are we going to use SHAs or not, right? Which is, if I have something that perfectly encapsulates all the bits for one of my dependencies, it's a perfect lookup mechanism, but it also means that I actually can't do this. I can't use absolute paths, right? So
I think you can, right? Like,
how would I
the dependency structure? Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, if I'm gonna use the bits of my dependency to like key or use it in the path to that dependency in this structure, let's say. Here, scroll back up. then
Mhm.
it has to it has to use the bits of that dependency, right?
I think Ben's question is maybe a little bit simpler. It's just
But
like,
Buildpack TOML.
sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Steve.
There's a little bit of an audio delay.
So so given the way we define dependencies today, we define it with both an ID and a version number, right? Which means that it maps to this dependency directory's ID and version number. You have to be able to resolve the dependency using nothing but the buildpack toml in the first place. And given those two things, an ID and a version number, you should be able to predict where on the file system that will exist if it does, and go download it if it doesn't.
Okay. I got you. Yeah, so I agree. And like the first thing is like I should be able to look at my buildpack toml and instantly infer exactly what path the my dependency is living at, right? So like even here, I guess you can kind of say we basically kind of use this, right? If this was just the dependency name and I had a version here, you could instantaneously give me a path where you would expect a dependency to be. The only reason I kind of didn't know if we moved away from that idea was that it has like, it means that we are making assumptions about how other people are going to be like providing dependencies. And I thought it would be beneficial for us to provide like an interface or an additional file like this package toml file, so that even if these locations change or if the lifecycle spec changes, then you'll still be able to like give a build pack the correct information, right?
Ben, something to note is that all of the dependencies for all build packs installed on a builder are going to be in that same deps directory. And so if there's nothing expressed by the lifecycle that says this stuff is installed for you, right, then it feels like there's maybe a contract issue where a build pack could not declare that it needs a particular dependency, but suddenly behave differently because another build pack brought that dependency with it. There's also the question of like, should a build pack have a way of knowing without checking on the file system that something was downloaded ahead of time, like it was cache versus it needs to download it dynamically. That's maybe less of an issue because you could just look it up on the file system path in a particular way. But because it's a shared dependency directory, it feels like there should be some contract that says, okay, this is your stuff.
Yeah,
it's debatable.
I will reserve. Yeah, I'll reserve final judgment until I play with it. But that seems like an extra bit of overhead. Like you're still going to need all the keys and version numbers anyway to look it up inside of whatever this file is. It feels like you could just go to the file system and look up that same information.
Yeah.
I'd be much more likely to say the buildpack toml should describe what dependencies it expects to be hanging around, and have the builder synthesize or have the lifecycle synthesize it from that perspective, than to add yet another file where we describe a dependency in buildpack. We describe a dependency when we build the build package, and we describe a dependency in whatever this other packaged toml file is as well.
Yep. No, I totally agree. I mean, it's very easy for like a build pack author who's in charge of putting their dependencies exactly where they want to say, I know exactly where this should be, and just look it up right away. Okay.
So another question on that. How does the build pack author understand where CNB deps is? Is that something that like you could say as part of the contract, this is an absolute path that is always fixed to be this, and therefore build packs are allowed to install anything in there that they claim to have provided? It feels pretty loose, but like if we don't expose the fully qualified paths to the individual dependencies that the build pack came from, do we need to expose like the root? Is a question. I'm not saying we need an answer to that right now. I just bringing that up as like a, should that be part of the contract if we're not going to go with explicitly listing them out to the build pack at build time?
Yeah, I would definitely argue that there shouldn't be an implied path, right? I think it should always be configurable just in the case of some system for which it needs to be different. And we've seen that in different CI systems that want to leverage the lifecycle directly.
And then at that point, you're giving it a path that has things, and you're telling a build pack, but only access some of these things, and you know which ones you're only supposed to access. Just only access those, right? So I'm not saying I'm actually not very opinionated. I push for having a separate file initially, but I don't have very strong opinions. But I'm trying to explain the perspective of why it might be useful to have those things explicitly listed out.
If that's a concern, should deps have a folder per build pack then? If you want to just provide a root path that has all the things that belong to that build pack.
So then
the cost is that you would have maybe some duplication, but
you'd have to make a dependency specific to a build pack, and then the SHA of that dependency on the registry would change if it needed to be used by a whole bunch of different build packs. And so if you wanted to make a node, just a dependency that installs node, that restriction would suddenly make it so that you have to make one for every single build pack that you want to be able to use node, instead of being able to make a general, here's a node available in any build pack, and decide I want to be packaged with that node. So I would support not scoping them to build packs very strongly for that reason, because the SHA changes if the paths change.
All right, I think there's like I guess some of these concerns I would definitely appreciate it if just plop them on this, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of updates to this, and I'm going to have a difficult time keeping track of every single point that's made. But,
yeah. If people don't put it there, then it doesn't happen for sure.
Okay, so I guess given this temporary kind of structure for dependencies, I guess the next kind of question that you might want an answer to is like, okay, how do I actually pack this up? This also might be something that's a little too much detail for like this, because it's an RFC, but just like giving an optional user-facing interface that you could use to package these things up. Again, you have to specify ID and version, which is in Buildpack TOML. But okay, and I guess kind of the final little piece here is, or I guess the final two pieces. So Terrence, I think, asked a question very shortly after I posted this about this, I believe, which is like, do we want to spec out the manner in which layers are added to a build package so that you get reproducible packages, I guess. Reproducible build packages, yeah.
I don't think that's a question. We struggled with reproducible build packages in the first round. It has to be specified as part of this.
Yeah. Okay. And so I think that's initially I kind of left some of this stuff blank because there's like going to be some trade-offs no matter what way you slice it if you're packaging something and you come up against like the limit on the number of layers you're allowed to have in a build. And
we don't think that's really an issue these days.
Oh, really?
Some very large number, multiple hundreds.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well then,
Is 127 not the number anymore?
I think I heard Steven say 255 recently, but it's a big number.
Yeah. Eventually we'll run into this. I think in the end, instead of attempting to account for it deeply in the abstractions of what we're building, it's something like, as soon as we have an image that has more than that, it'll just smash the remaining layers together and throw some metadata on it and say, hey, treat these as separate layers, and then we'll lose some performance for really large images. But I would support, because it's going to show up everywhere when it shows up, I would support making that a separate RFC that's generic.
Okay.
And we can do it in a reproducible way, right? It could be all layers over this that are smaller than this or something get combined together, so that you always get the same result. But I'd suggest having one user run into it first. In this case, we might, though. This might be the first time we do, because if you have a builder that has a lot of build packs on it with a lot of dependencies, you could be pushing that number. It's just, I don't think we'll get there, but it could happen.
Yeah, I guess Just for like what we need in this RFC, would you say it sounds like we probably want a schema or like to have this spec'd out so that this is reproducible. That was a decision that was made in the last. Okay, all right.
Yeah, I believe we did this with build packages lexically by ID, then lexically by version, right? Like it's not, you should go figure out exactly what the spec is in build package and just make sure it matches that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right, I will do that. Okay, then we have this kind of last little bit, which is the kind of some of the plumbing, how the life cycle is able to determine which layers it should add to a build, given that a certain build package given that a certain build pack is running, and so these additional kind of JSON fields just need to be added so that it can look this stuff up. And also kind of provide this file down here that has the ID and version information. That is, so, any questions on that?
Is this package.toml unique per build pack in this?
Yeah, well, it's for build packages. So a build package can either be one build pack or a meta
But during
build pack,
build
basically.
execution, will that?
Yeah, so build execution, I think that the only time we actually need this file is when we're running like a leaf build pack that actually has a like detect and build binary inside of it, right?
And the expectation is the lifecycle generates package.toml at build time?
Yes.
I don't think we have this build pack layers inside of the image right now, do we? So it'd somehow have to get that depth information through an alternative mechanism to the lifecycle as well?
You don't have, so okay, is this, you can't read this.
So right now, this is a label on an image, but the lifecycle is executed inside an image, so it wouldn't necessarily, it needs some other mechanism to figure out which of these dependencies belong to which build packs inside the image itself. It's kind of a lifecycle implementation thing.
Okay.
Seems like we're not sure we're going to keep package toml anyways, right? I wonder if we could decide if we're going to keep it first, and then if we're going to keep it, figure out the details of how we're going to get the metadata from the image into the container.
Okay, that sounds reasonable. That's good to know, though.
So I have two more questions, and one, in this document, is there some statement of what happens when two build packages are smashed together and there is overlap between the dependencies that they've chosen, the dependency naming scheme?
There is not. The kind of initial idea is you probably don't want that to happen, but
right. I have no control over the build packages that are smashed in with my build packages on a customer site.
If the layers have the same digest, then it should just work. If the layers have a different digest, then something horrible has happened, and you shouldn't let anybody build or build a builder or do anything with that, because there's a dependency that is lying about what it is.
I don't think that's true at all. It is totally reasonable for someone to call something io.paketo.jre, for example, and there are many flavors of JREs, right?
But like, if the things are domain scoped, then within a domain, if we produce a io.paketo.jre, and then a customer or end user decides to have another io.paketo.jre that is, different and has different bits, then they did the wrong thing. They should have called it something else, right? They shouldn't have produced a dependency that they called io.paketo.jre that doesn't have the checksum, that verifies that it is what it is, right? Or they could have used a different version, in which case it's okay. It doesn't have to have the same ID, just a different version.
Yeah, this goes back to the thing, though, that we are not using universally unique things to guarantee lack of overlap, and so we're going to start having overlap. I guess it's the same. Somebody can call a build pack any ID that they want, and we get the same thing.
Right.
Okay.
Build pack and dependency IDs follow the rule of they have the owner information in them, and if you're the owner, you better make sure that your ID inversions are unique. And if somebody else claims to be you, then they're doing something wrong.
Okay. Then my next question is, I didn't see anything that talks about how a build pack indicates that they want this particular layer to make it into a run image and for the things on the path and LD library path and things like that to be contributed.
Yes. Okay. So it's kind of, yeah, we can jump on over here, but I think so. Let's see, where did I plot that down?
I think there are two aspects. There's one about including during build, and there's one about including during run. And I think you just found the run one. I was going to point out. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So I think that we can. This should hopefully work. Just by virtue of if you package up a dependency in the right way, you should just be able to make a symlink to it from your like layers path, right? And then when your image gets exported, it should say, okay, all right, you have a dependency on this layer. It also needs to end up in the run image.
Does Pack do that? Pack traverses symlinks and figures out what layer those symlinks point to that?
It would be extra logic, right? The exporter could identify when a layer is a symlink instead of a proper layer, and then know to hoist the original, not by copying the bits across, but hoist the original layer from the build package into the remote image and preserve the symlink as it goes across, beautifully ensuring no data transfer across the whole thing.
But that would be limited exclusively to the top layer directory?
What do you mean?
Like, I assume it's not planning on traversing the entire file system under a particular layer to find out if anything symlinks off to another directory or off to another layer?
No, just the layer directory itself within the, so like /layers /buildpack ID /node, right? We know that thing is special because it also has a node.toml, right? If the directory there is instead a symlink to the deps directory layer, then instead of copying the contents and exporting them into that location, it just preserves the symlink in the export and preserves the exact same layer in the build package, moving across into the final image.
Okay, and what is what happens if you plan on writing into that layer?
Got to change it.
You've got to copy.
Yeah.
So writing into the layer could be like just setting up the environment.
Yeah, like writing environment for it. There's a thing where we've chosen to update the CA certs inside of a JRE with the ones that are from the container. And because we're doing it at build time, like there's no other tricks, right? You need to actually change the JDK where it exists on the file system so that Maven will be able to pick up those changes. So like you have to mutate the directory. There's no sort of symlink trickery that you can get away with other than
you can't put them in another layer?
Nope. It has to be one very specific file in one very specific directory, which of course changes between different versions of Java, but that's my burden, not yours. Yeah, like I don't want to do it. Up until 4 days ago, I'd managed to avoid it in all cases, but Maven is such that you cannot contribute this information other than modifying this file in your JDK because Maven's got problems.
We could explore allowing sub-symlinks to the deps directory and then preserving the whole other layer as it moves across, aside from, but
like there's no, it is just a very corner case.
So is the expectation here that in the dep you're going to already write like all the M stuff in that dependency?
So this is like you would already have a bin file, a lib path that are automatically going to get added via the regular lifecycle hooks. Yes, that's.
Maybe we could get away with this. It does mean then that you are not sort of shipping a default dependency at that part, right? Like one of the nice things we have today is there is a tarball, it contains node, or there is a tarball, it contains a JRE. We ship that to customers. Customers can inspect it and know what it is. And we then get to add things in an env directory to it
Right.
after it has been untarred into the image. And those things can still match, right? They're sort of relative to the paths that are being passed in, and across multiple builds, this is fine, and stuff like that. Terrence, I think like you might have a view that we are abusing that, right? Like there's nothing, if you know the layer that you've unzipped MRI into, you could write another layer that has all of the envs that points to that layer's path, right? You wouldn't have to actually code that into the dependency. You do it. It sounds like we definitely do it all over the damn show. But like we've just gotten lucky that no one else has a profile directory or an env directory that that we're writing into already. None of our dependencies.
Something to think about is, where before we had tarballs of dependencies that are, don't have an absolute path in them, there's still a concept of a dependency artifact in here. It just looks like a layer blob instead of looking like a TGZ, right? And so you can still treat that as this is a canonical dependency, and then modifications to it. You have two options, right? You can either copy them or you can create additional layers that provide additional configuration for them. And both of those seem like reasonable extension mechanisms. I think this is all stuff.
Yeah, I think,
summarize.
Yeah, Terrence was driving towards an idea. So when we untar a JRE, we write some environment variables into it, right? We write those environment variables into an env directory in the dep directory before it goes out. Since the paths that are going to point to are, potentially relative and things like that. We have a problem with how you refer to this directory. So we do not currently have any agreement beyond /workspace. Oh, is that true? It's unclear to me if we have or we should probably actually define this, if these things have to be mounted at a consistent location between build time and launch time. There are very few things in the spec where that is true today. Beyond, layers will always be in the same place, and the workspace will always be in the same place.
So in this case, the deps directory will be at the same place at build and launch time. As it's moved across, its location will stay across, and absolute paths within the deps directory don't have to reference it as if it were a Buildpack layer. They can reference it from the deps directory, and it should work. Everything should just work out.
That should go in a suggestion here, or that should go in the doc somewhere.
So one thing that's interesting about this is this kind of presupposes that you'll have a TGZ ahead of time that's not rooted at the thing. In package toml, it adds a URI to a TGZ, right? I wonder if the packaging interface should be more like a tool you can run on a directory to package it up as a dependency layer TGZ, right? That's an official FS blob. And then that's what you include when you do your packaging. I wonder if that feels better because it doesn't create two artifact formats. It avoids the Buildpack TGZ versus Buildpack CNB problem, moves everything to being in OCI format initially.
The problem is we have to open that up to almost every kind of dependency, right? Like some of the dependencies certainly are tarballs, other ones are zips, other ones are, God, somebody had a tar XC the other day. But I think the more insidious one is we get jar files, and I don't actually want to untar the jar file. I just need to put it on its path on a class path without any modification at all. And so like you're opening yourself up, you basically force this spec to become more complex to handle all of these use cases.
You wouldn't have to unpack your jar file, right? You'd just run a package dependency command on your jar file and provide the package dependency command with an ID and a version, and it would convert your jar file into a TGZ or .cnbd or something, FS layer blob, or even FS layer blob, single FS layer blob wrapped in an OCI wrapper, right? That you could carry around as a dependency file. It's just an idea. I don't think we have to do it, but I wanted to throw that out there as a possible interface. And before we run into one more, sorry.
I do. generally like that idea, and I do generally like this. Danny, you're going to get raked over the coals on this by me because I desperately want this to be really, really good and to start using it before the spec actually supports it. So beware of that. This is not me being negative on it generally. The other question, I like the idea of having the untarred dependency on there and then just linking the layer in, regardless of how we sort of get around to doing that. But one thing I'm really, really worried about is I'm concerned we're effectively building two different code paths inside of Buildpacks. One where the dependency comes to it already untarred, and another one where the dependency hasn't been mounted up and we have to go download it from the internet and do the
That was one of my
ourselves.
questions.
Yeah. And I don't think this is directly addressed in here, and I think we as a group on this working group call should think kind of hard about the implications of a build pack having to have a lot of that knowledge today.
For pack file, I built an abstraction that covers this up, that accounts for this. So
but it can only account if it for the types it knows, right? Like, how does it know whether what it should actually be doing is creating a symlink to a jar file versus unzipping a zip file that it just downloaded?
Oh, I see.
That's
so
the
like,
problem here.
It's just a generic, the one in pack file is just a generic, go get this, and if it's already present in the build pack, then use the one in the build pack instead, right? Or return the path to the one in the build pack instead, and then the build pack can, it's different.
Yeah, and that's what we do, right? Like, we do the same thing. We have basically treat a dependencies directory as a cache. No matter what, we're always going to get the JRE tarball. We're always going to unzip the tarball. Whether or not we need to download that tarball is more interesting, right? Like, we can do some indirection there. But this is, if this is already on the directory, we're good. But if it's not, directory doesn't exist, create a new directory here and then untar this thing. And it feels like in all the build pack implementations, you basically end up with this conditional logic before you do anything involving layers, where you have to decide, am I getting an already untarred thing, or am I going to download the tarred thing and then have to unzip it? And it's something that is difficult to hide with abstraction, since an artifact could be anything, right? It could be a thing you want to open. It could be a thing you don't want to open. It could be a tarball. It might not be a tarball.
But we definitely don't want to take a TGZ and put it inside of another TGZ and double compress it, right?
Yeah.
And so
I totally agree.
Yeah. I definitely think it's something I have to think about. I know we have no time left. I had one final comment. If you scroll up a little bit on the build, on build persistence, there's an implication. Sorry, stop at the bottom. You just scroll past it. How should we determine if a dependency layer should be added to build? I think that would involve, what's proposed there would involve rewriting the builder between the detect and the build step, so it has less layers. I would just propose that we keep everything on the builder exactly the same way, with all the dependencies from all the build packs, regardless of if they were selected or not. And I thought that was maybe a controversial opinion, so I wanted to throw it out there, even though we don't have too much time to chat about it.
Yeah, I think the Paketo build packs actually do version resolution as part of detect. Anybody on the Paketo team want to confirm that?
It all happens during build.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, then I think that we might possibly get away with that, not mounting up dependencies during detect phase.
So if you build a builder with all the offline build packages, you get all the dependencies for every single offline build package in the dapps directory. I think what this RFC says is that between the detect and build phases, you have to generate a new ephemeral image with the dependencies that didn't correspond to the build packs that aren't going to participate not being used. I think that's too much work. Instead, we should just keep all the dependencies there. They're already on the node. There's no extra downloading that happens. It doesn't seem too dangerous to expose, like the build packs are already going to see the other build packs dependencies. Why not just let them see everything and really have a strict contract and say they're only allowed to touch the ones that they're responsible for? That seems reasonable enough to me.
Matthew, is there's something weird about ephemeral images in KPAC? Is that right? Like, you don't support them?
Well, it's just on Kubernetes. If you make one pod that spits out a build, you need to have all the images ahead of time. So you can't spit out ephemeral builders all in one build pod. So
yeah, okay.
So pulling down these depth layers for the build after detect just isn't possible either in Tecton or in KPAC if we wanted to keep that structure.
Okay. So I guess we put a pin in that then.
No.
Okay.
All right. This was excellent
Thanks, everybody.
conversation.
Yeah.
Next time, Forrest, you're going to go over tomorrow. I think you're going to go over the build plan
Buildpack. Yeah.
changes.
Yeah, I can be here for that.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.